Some shocking new information coming out about the life of Reverend Billy Graham. Listen to this. The FBI just releasing nearly 500 pages of files about the Charlotte evangelist. He died just 10 months ago. And these documents include threats that were sent to Graham and some U.S. leaders as well.
Billy Graham preached to over 200 million people and became one of the most influential voices in modern Christianity. But behind the powerful sermons and public image was a private life filled with doubt, political pressure, and regrets few ever saw. Decades later, his family discovered old journals hidden in his study, revealing struggles that could have shaken his ministry forever. What they found painted a deeper portrait of a man admired by millions, yet still wrestling with faith, power, and the burden of living up to his calling. The Hidden Journals Revelations. When Billy Graham passed away in 2018, his family uncovered something unexpected in his North Carolina study. Private journals and writings tucked away in drawers and cabinets that no one had ever seen before. These were not just everyday notes, but confessions revealing a side of Graham that contrasted sharply with his public persona as the steadfast preacher. The journals spoke of doubts, inner struggles, and regrets that threatened to shake the foundation of his ministry. What had been hidden behind decades of unwavering confidence now began to surface. One of the most surprising things the journals revealed was a crisis of faith that almost derailed Graham during one of the most important moments in his career. The man broadcast into millions of homes, whose sermons inspired countless lives, had moments of profound uncertainty. This internal conflict challenged him deeply and made him question the very Bible he had preached without question for years. The gravity of this crisis is a reminder that even the most iconic spiritual leaders are not immune to struggle. In addition to wrestling with faith, the writings unveiled the complexities of Graham's relationship with power, particularly his closeness to political figures like Richard Nixon. Their friendship was more entangled than most people know, with Graham offering advice on campaigns and political strategy. The journals open a window into the challenges of balancing spiritual guidance with political involvement, a line Graham repeatedly struggled to navigate. Among the revelations were also personal admissions of regret, choices, and words he wished he could take back, moments when his actions conflicted with what he felt was true in his heart. These pages made it clear that Graham's journey was far from simple. It was often messy, filled with moral quandaries and lessons learned at great cost. The perfection the public saw was, in many ways, a carefully maintained exterior. What his family found didn't really lessen Graham's legacy, but it did sort of complicate it, in a way that pulls you toward a more honest and human understanding of someone who's often put up on a pedestal. They uncovered the layers of a man whose faith got tested over and over, whose ministry was a battle not only with the world, but also with himself. For millions who admired Graham, this becomes a stark reminder that faith is rarely a straight path. It bends, it drifts, it resists you. These journals give voice to the private man under the pulpit, and they reveal vulnerabilities that even some of his closest fans never saw. They stand as a quiet kind of proof of that tension between what people expected in public and what was real in private. That tension seems to have shaped so much of Graham's life and work. When you understand those hidden struggles, it makes it easier to see the kind of courage required to keep moving forward in a calling that never lets you off the hook. Even though the full story of what was found stays mostly sealed, kept by family and guarded with care, the hints inside it still change the way we look at Billy Graham. Not just as an icon, but as a man carrying enormous responsibilities and some profound fears. His life reads like faith being built, then rebuilt, with shadows and doubts sitting nearby. And maybe that's where his true legacy actually sits, right there in that uneasy balance. Behind every sermon, behind every crusade, there was a man who knew what it meant to question, to stumble, and then to keep going anyway. The writings from that quiet study remind us that the heart of faith is often forged during the struggle, not after it. And for Billy Graham, those silent battles shaped the very voice that helped define a generation. These revelations also set the stage for a deeper look at the life that eventually led to such a public calling. A life rooted in humble beginnings and shaped by forces that would test a young man's resolve and his drive to become a global spiritual leader. The journey that took Billy Graham from a modest farm boy to a global evangelist was shaped by moments both ordinary and extraordinary, and by a steadfast commitment to a calling that began in his youth. The farm boy who found faith. Billy Graham was born on a large dairy farm near Charlotte, North Carolina, where his parents managed some 70 cows across 300 acres. Growing up in this environment meant early mornings and hard work. He had to milk 20 cows before and after school each day. This demanding routine instilled in him a sense of discipline and a strong work ethic that would later become the backbone of his ministry. As a teenager, Graham was far from the pulpit-ready figure he would become. He was more interested in baseball, girls, and normal youthful pursuits than religion. An unusual experience at the age of 15, when his father forced him and his sister to drink beer until they felt sick to discourage them, left him with a lifelong distaste for alcohol. These formative moments shaped his character in ways that extended beyond his later public persona. The turning point came at a revival meeting in Charlotte, when Graham was 16. Initially reluctant to attend, due to rejection from his local youth group and little interest in religious gatherings, he was persuaded by a local farmer named Albert McMakin to come along. The event changed everything. Though he couldn't recall the preacher's exact words, Graham felt an undeniable spiritual call that led him to commit his life to Christ. This radical change set the foundation for a lifetime of ministry. Despite this newfound faith, Graham's early years weren't without struggle. At 18, he enrolled at Bob Jones College, but quickly found the strict rules and atmosphere challenging, nearly being expelled after one semester. The founder's bleak appraisal that he might only become a small-town preacher contrasted sharply with Graham's own ambitions. Instead of giving up, he transferred to Florida Bible Institute, where encouragement and less harsh discipline allowed him to flourish. At Florida Bible Institute, Graham practiced preaching in kinda unusual ways, sermonizing to birds, trees, and even alligators by the river. It was all very earnest and imaginative, and those sorts of preparations seemed to hint at the steady, unrelenting passion he would end up bringing to his life's work. Then there was this pivotal evening in 1938, when he was out walking alone on the golf course, all tangled up about his future. So he knelt and vowed to do whatever God wanted. That prayer became a spiritual commitment that would steer him through decades of ministry. In 1939, when he was only 20, Graham was ordained as a Southern Baptist minister, so he moved away from his Presbyterian roots to a tradition he seemed to admire, mainly for its active evangelism. His immersion baptism in a lake felt like a real fresh start, separate and transformative too. Even early on, people recognized his possible impact. Somehow, they already believed he could help spread the Christian message widely. In the 1940s, Graham seemed to grow as a speaker in this kind of ongoing way, with his first big platform showing up through Youth for Christ rallies, starting in 1944. Those rallies were pretty energetic. They drew thousands, and they blended preaching with music plus celebrity testimonies too, so young people could grab hope during the shadow of World War II. From 1945, his role as Youth for Christ's first full-time employee pushed things even farther, across the United States and well beyond. And it kind of set the base for the ministry that kept expanding. That fast momentum helped form Graham into a preacher who was both deeply passionate and strategic about reaching others. He had this talent for linking with audiences, reading cultural currents, and organizing events that really worked. Because of that, he became a person with rising national and international weight. In hindsight, those seeds planted on a North Carolina farm in those earlier years would eventually turn into a global spiritual movement, not just a local effort. Billy Graham's early life shows the shift of a boy from modest beginnings into a powerful voice, kept moving by faith, stubborn drive, and a sense of calling that would later touch millions. It wasn't a journey that sped along, and it wasn't easy either, but it was intensely determined, guided by a purpose that basically shaped everything afterwards. The early chapters of his life only hint at the scale of what was to come, as Billy Graham's ministry would soon burst onto the national stage in ways few could have imagined. Rise to prominence and ministry growth. Billy Graham's rise from regional preacher to international evangelist gained unstoppable momentum during the 1940s and 50s. His electrifying Youth for Christ rallies drew tens of thousands, offering hope and a renewed sense of faith to a world recovering from war. These events were bold and modern for their time, mixing music, celebrity voices, and passionate sermons, captivating audiences in the United States, Canada, and Europe. The defining breakthrough came in 1949 with the Los Angeles Crusade. Originally scheduled for just 3 weeks under a circus tent called the Canvas Cathedral, the event blossomed into an 8-week revival, attracting approximately 400,000 attendees. High-profile conversions, including radio host Stuart Hamblin and war hero Louis Zamperini, captured media attention and boosted Graham's national profile. Support from media magnate William Randolph Hearst further propelled Graham's ministry into the public eye. Hearst's newspapers promoted the crusade aggressively, creating a buzz that transformed Billy Graham into a household name. From this moment, doors opened to cities across the country and eventually the world, establishing Graham's pattern of large-scale crusades that would become his hallmark. To manage this growing global ministry, Graham founded the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association in 1950, starting modestly from a small office in Minnesota. This organization supported radio broadcasts like Hour of Decision, which reached millions worldwide, as well as magazines, films, and television programs. The BGEA's multi-platform approach maximized the reach of Graham's message and helped professionalize evangelical outreach. By the mid-1950s, Graham's ministry had become a global movement. His international crusades drew millions, beginning with a 12-week event in London in 1954 that drew over 2 million attendees. These crusades were notable not only for their size, but for their effort to unite diverse populations, even in regions with deep racial and political divides. Graham's 1973 South African crusade in Durban is a striking example. He insisted on integrated seating despite apartheid laws, calling the system a sin and risking backlash from the government. This bold stance earned him respect worldwide and demonstrated his commitment to racial unity, even as his actions on civil rights at other times proved more cautious. Leveraging emerging technologies, Graham used satellite broadcasts in the 1990s to reach millions simultaneously across 185 countries in over 100 languages. This innovative use of media extended his impact far beyond physical crusades. Over his lifetime, he spoke in person to over 215 million people and reached millions more through radio, television, and print. Throughout this rise, Graham maintained a focus on clear, simple biblical messages delivered with passionate conviction. His ability to engage with local churches, media, and communities ensured his events were relevant and influential. This combination of heartfelt preaching and strategic savvy allowed him to build one of the most effective evangelistic ministries in history. Billy Graham's ascent to prominence was not just about numbers, but about creating a spiritual movement that touched hearts worldwide. The seeds that took root in a North Carolina farm and small rallies grew into a ministry that shaped a century, shaping conversations about faith, politics, and culture far beyond the church walls. As his ministry expanded, so too did the challenges and complexities of his personal faith and public relationships. setting the stage for moments that tested his convictions deeply. The crisis of faith before Los Angeles. In 1949, just weeks before what would become one of the most pivotal moments of his ministry, Billy Graham faced an unexpected and intense crisis of faith. This was not a fleeting doubt, but a deep spiritual turmoil about the very foundation of his preaching, the authority and truth of the Bible itself. Graham, who had long preached with conviction, began to wonder if he could truly trust the scriptures he had devoted his life to sharing. This crisis was partly influenced by his close friend Charles Templeton, a fellow evangelist who was struggling with his own doubts about reconciling the Bible with modern scientific and intellectual thinking. Templeton's questioning opened the door for Graham to wrestle with difficult questions, forcing him into a personal battle between intellectual uncertainty and spiritual commitment. It was a moment that could have undone his career altogether. Feeling lost and unsure, Graham sought refuge at Forest Home, a Christian retreat nestled in the peaceful mountains of California. There he engaged in conversations with trusted mentors like Henrietta Mears, who warned him of the dangers of losing confidence in Scripture, how such doubt could unravel one's entire faith. They urged Graham to seek God's guidance with humility and faith, rather than intellectual certainty alone. One night, alone in the woods, Graham knelt by a tree stump, placing his Bible before him, and prayed in earnest. He admitted that he did not have all the answers, but chose to trust the Word of God by faith. His prayer was a commitment to believe even when understanding failed him, a defining spiritual surrender. This moment lifted a heavy burden from his heart and restored his peace. Emerging from this crisis, Graham returned to the 1949 Los Angeles Crusade with renewed vigor and certainty. His messages now carried an energy fueled by the knowledge that faith was not blind acceptance, but a courageous choice to trust. Audiences felt the sincerity and strength in his words, drawn to a preacher whose conviction was forged through struggle and triumph. The Los Angeles Crusade sort of became legendary itself, stretching from 3 weeks to 8, and getting hundreds of thousands in attendance. It kind of marked Graham's resurrection not just as a preacher, but as a spiritual force, you know. Still, under that winning, triumphant surface, the whole thing left an imprint that stayed with him. Faith felt fragile and personal, and it needed renewal, even for people who looked the most solid, the most steadfast. And this crisis planted, kind of quietly, the seed for Graham's lifelong humility about faith and ministry. He did not say much about that vulnerability, but he carried it all his life. It was, in a way, a reminder that even icons can wrestle with doubt. It also gave an honest texture to how he appeared publicly, showing that certainty usually comes after real wrestling, not before. At the same time, the experience brought into focus a big truth about spiritual leadership. Great faith does not mean you have no doubt. It means you keep going, persevere, even when doubt shows up. It turned into a defining moment, one that proved Graham's ministry was built on tested, lived faith, not only on public acclaim or numbers alone. That depth is part of what made his message land so strongly across decades. His path through this crisis then shaped the tone and substance of what came next in his ministry, clear and confident, but also compassionate and deeply human. The man who faced such serious doubt eventually became one of the 20th century's most influential voices, and it left everyone with the reminder that faith is, at the end, a decision of trust, while questions are still there. As Graham's public ministry soared, his private engagement with politics, particularly his relationship with Richard Nixon, would introduce another layer of complexity to his life and legacy. Politics and the Nixon relationship. Billy Graham's friendship with Richard Nixon began in the 1950s, when Nixon was a rising political figure still serving as a senator. Over time, their relationship deepened, with Graham becoming not only a spiritual advisor, but also an influential figure in Nixon's political campaigns. By 1968, Graham played an active role in Nixon's presidential bid, writing memos, offering campaign strategies, and helping to mobilize evangelical voters. This closeness blurred the boundaries between faith and politics in ways that would later prove controversial. Graham visited the White House numerous times during Nixon's presidency, 30 documented visits, and often stayed overnight. He prayed at Nixon's inauguration in 1969, publicly endorsing him as a leader chosen by God, and offered counsel on sensitive issues like the Vietnam War. One of the most startling revelations about Graham's political involvement came from the discovery that he even suggested bombing dikes in North Vietnam if peace talks failed, a proposal that could have led to widespread civilian casualties. This stark detail reveals the extent to which Graham intertwined spiritual guidance with harsh political realities, reflecting the complicated ethical terrain he navigated. Throughout the Watergate scandal, Graham remained staunchly loyal to Nixon, publicly defending him and refusing to believe the president could be guilty of wrongdoing. However, when the White House tapes were released in 1974, revealing Nixon's duplicity and other disturbing conversations, Graham was devastated. The betrayal struck him so deeply that he reportedly cried and became physically ill, marking a turning point in his perception of political power. Further controversy arose decades later when tapes from 1972 surfaced, revealing Graham and Nixon discussing anti-Semitic remarks. Nixon complained about Jewish control of the media, and Graham appeared to agree, though he later apologized and insisted these words did not reflect his true feelings. This incident damaged Graham's reputation as a unifying figure and cast a shadow over his political connections. In interviews later in life, Graham admitted to mistakes regarding his political entanglements. He expressed regret for having become too deeply involved with politicians, recognizing the risk of compromising his spiritual mission. Watergate served as a wake-up call, prompting him to warn against the close mingling of religion and politics, fearing it could harm both faith and the broader society. Despite the controversies, Graham's influence on presidents remained profound. He advocated publicly for Nixon's pardon after his resignation, seeing it as essential for national healing, a position that angered many but reflected Graham's belief in forgiveness and reconciliation. His courage in standing by his convictions, despite public backlash, revealed the complexity of balancing political loyalty and spiritual principles. The Nixon relationship exemplifies the paradox in Graham's life. A man devoted to faith, yet entangled deeply in political power, grappling with the challenges that path entails. It highlights the tension between influencing governance and maintaining religious integrity, a tightrope Graham walked throughout his career. Graham's political journey was only part of his life's complicated relationship with pressing social issues, including the turbulent racial landscape of America, race, integration, and civil rights. Billy Graham's record on race and civil rights remains one of the most complex chapters of his legacy. At a time when segregation was deeply entrenched across America, Graham took several public stands that surprised both supporters and critics. One of the most notable occurred in 1953 during a crusade in Chattanooga, Tennessee, when he personally ordered the removal of ropes separating white and black audience members. He reportedly told organizers that if the barriers remained, he would not preach. This commitment to integrated crusades continued throughout his ministry. Graham held events in predominantly black communities, including Harlem and Brooklyn, drawing diverse audiences and challenging segregationist norms. In the South, his integrated meetings often attracted criticism, threats, and acts of vandalism, yet he refused to return to segregated seating arrangements. However, Graham's approach to the broader civil rights movement was more cautious. While he believed racism was wrong and regularly called for racial unity, he generally avoided participating in protests, marches, or acts of civil disobedience. Unlike many civil rights leaders, He believed lasting change would come primarily through spiritual transformation rather than political activism. This position put him at odds with some activists who thought legal challenges and big public demonstrations were needed tools for reaching equality. Even in those major moments when racial tension flared up, Graham kept circling back to preaching reconciliation and trying to alter hearts rather than openly backing direct action. His relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. showed that friction in a pretty clear way. The two men had a lot of mutual respect, and they sometimes appeared together, brought together by a wish to improve race relations. But their approaches, and even their own priorities, started to pull them apart over time. While King pushed for legislative and social shifts, Graham stayed committed to evangelism as the main remedy for society's ills. Critics say Graham had chances to speak more boldly against systemic racism. Later on, he admitted he wished he had done more during the civil rights era, and that confession basically showed he was willing to examine his own gaps honestly without dressing them up. Still, Graham's attempts to connect his crusades with concrete integration and to challenge segregation inside religious spaces helped nudge many churches and a lot of believers toward broader inclusion. So his legacy on race isn't clean, and it isn't one-dimensional either. It reads like the story of a leader who made real movements toward equality, yet wrestled with how deeply to step into the political battles around it. In the end, Graham believed spiritual renewal was the real groundwork for social change. Depending on your view, that method can seem courageous, careful, or incomplete, but it remains a key piece for understanding the man and the period he lived through. Navigating the turbulent waters of social issues was only part of Graham's wider evolution, as his personal life and theological views also transformed with age and experience. Personal life and evolving beliefs. Billy Graham's personal life was anchored by his marriage to Ruth Bell Graham, whom he met at Wheaton College in 1940. Their relationship was built on faith, commitment, and mutual support. Despite Graham's demanding travel schedule, the couple remained close through regular communication and prayer. Married for 63 years until Ruth died in 2007, Graham often described her as the greatest influence on his life. Behind the public image of a world-famous evangelist was a marriage filled with warmth, humor, and genuine partnership. Ruth's strong personality and unwavering support helped keep Graham grounded as his ministry expanded across the globe. As he grew older, Graham's theological views also evolved. Though raised within a strict evangelical tradition, he gradually embraced a more inclusive approach to Christianity. He reached out to Protestants, Catholics, and other Christian groups, believing that believers could work together despite their differences. His 1964 meeting with Pope Paul VI surprised many supporters, but reflected his desire to unite Christians around a common mission. Some of Graham's later views kind of sparked debate. He was hinting that God's grace might extend beyond just those who explicitly knew Christ, and that maybe it messes with the stricter, more rigid takes on salvation. Critics didn't exactly agree, but Graham stayed kind of fixed on sharing God's love, not getting dragged into heavy theological arguing. On social issues, he kept traditional beliefs, yet he usually spoke with compassion rather than condemnation. Like when he talked about abortion or same-sex marriage, he would stress grace, a grounded kind of humility and respect for other people. Not just, okay, here's the rules, but more like, let's remember grace is real. In his later years, Graham ran into serious health problems, including Parkinson's disease, prostate cancer, and other age-related conditions. Even then, he kept writing and encouraging others through books like Nearing Home, where he mused on aging, faith, and how to prepare for eternity. And through it all, there was this lifelong marriage, evolving beliefs, and a willingness to keep becoming. Billy Graham sort of showed that spiritual maturity isn't a finish line, it's a journey. His story is not only ministry success, but also love, humility, compassion, and this continual shifting into something more. The layers of Billy Graham's private struggles and public victories ultimately combine to define a lasting legacy that continues to inspire and challenge today. Legacy, reflections, and lessons. Billy Graham's legacy was not a flawless record, but a deeply human story of faith, struggle, influence, and perseverance. After his death, private journals revealed a man who wrestled with doubt, regret, and the heavy responsibilities that came with guiding millions. These writings showed that behind the famous preacher was someone facing many of the same questions and fears as ordinary people. Over his lifetime, Graham spoke to more than 215 million people in person and reached countless others through radio, television, and print. His message was simple, direct, and rooted in the Bible, helping millions find hope during uncertain times. Yet his influence reached beyond religion. He helped shape modern evangelical Christianity's relationship with media, race, politics, and public life. One of his defining lessons kinda came out of the way he wrestled with doubt, especially right before that 1949 Los Angeles crusade. Instead of keeping away from uncertainty, Graham basically faced it, and that honesty sort of gave his ministry a deeper authenticity. I mean, it felt real. Also, his nearness to political leaders, particularly Richard Nixon, showed the real dangers in blending spiritual authority with political power. Graham later talked about those moments with regret, and it left a steady warning behind about integrity and influence. Like, yeah, it matters. On race, he helped bring integration into his crusades before it was required by law, even if some critics still believed he could have gone further. His life held both courage and a kind of carefulness in a deeply divided era. In later years, illness and aging didn't wipe out his faith, not really. Instead, they pressed it inward, making his thoughts about mortality, grace, metapiety, and that whole preparation for eternity even more weighty. In the end, Billy Graham's story reminds us that major influence doesn't need perfection. His life was shaped by faith, failures, growth, and a message of hope that keeps moving through the organizations he built and the lives he reached. Billy Graham's life teaches us that faith is powerful not because it's easy, but because it endures through doubt and challenge. His story is one of courage, complexity, and compassion. If this story moved you, like the video, subscribe for more remarkable lives, and watch the next video on your screen for another powerful journey worth discovering.